Hi everyone, so I've never done a video like this before, but after watching a certain show last night, I really had the urge to do a bit of a reaction video. Last night, my husband and I watched a show. It's a newer show called Brilliant Minds. It was pretty good. It was the first episode we've ever seen, but my father-in-law told my husband about it because he saw a preview that there was going to be somebody with Tourette syndrome on it. Now, as I think you all know, I have my very timid first thoughts and reactions when going into shows like this, because most of the time the representation for people with Tourette syndrome, sorry, I just rewatched some of the clips and so it's making them act up a bit, but most of the time for characters with Tourette syndrome, they are only there for the joke, and the representation is less than helpful for people living with Tourette syndrome and not very entertaining, in my opinion. So I went into this with a negative mindset, if I'm being honest, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. There was a couple things that I didn't necessarily like, and I'll get into that. I'm going to share just a couple of the clips that I want to talk about. The main character, the character with Tourette syndrome, his name was Ezra, and he was seeing his doctor to talk about his Tourette syndrome again, and he wanted to talk about going through deep brain stimulation surgery.
I've been eating okay, exercising. I take my meds, but none of them help. That urge, it's like an itch. I have to scratch. The more I hold it in, the worse it gets.
Well, then don't hold it in. It's part of who you are.
On that note, I wanted to ask you about something. I've been reading about this surgery that could help with my tics. Deep brain stimulation.
Originally for Parkinson's, some centers are placing it for Tourette's, but
I'd like to try it.
But you're doing so well. You're right. I get by just fine. But what if I didn't have to be just fine?
A couple of things that I want to discuss from that short clip. The clip is longer, so definitely check it out. It was episode 11 on Brilliant Minds. It was on just last night, December 9th. Or I'm sorry, yeah, December 9th. I don't know what day it is. But one, the itch that he has to scratch, that is and the longer he holds it in, the worse it gets. That is a very accurate description. I know that I've talked about suppression on here many, many times, and it is. Suppression makes things a lot worse. So I was actually really happy to see that, because when people ask people to hold their tics in or to stop ticking, or makes the assumption that we can stop ticking or anything like that, it is very dangerous for the people with Tourette syndrome, because that's a dangerous mindset to get into, because suppression is so uncomfortable and it makes the tics so much worse later. So I was really, really pleased and happy with that portrayal of suppression, and that the doctor was encouraging him to not suppress, because it's part of us and all of those wonderful things. The other point that I wanted to talk about is the medication point, where he says that he's taken them, but they don't do anything. And that's something that struck a chord with me, because I was on medication in the past. I've talked about it a little bit on here, but I'm not on any medication anymore for my Tourette syndrome. And the point that I like that he said how none of them work, not because none of them work, but because so many people are like, well, can't you just take something for that and help it and make it better? Or if there's medicine out there, why wouldn't you try it? Or all of these things that people think that we as people with Tourette syndrome should be doing. The thing is that at this point right now that I'm recording this video, there is not a medication out there that is specifically for us with tics and Tourette syndrome. We take things that are for other things. I was on something that was for, I believe it was for seizures and migraines, and it was just known to maybe help tics. And yeah, it reduced my tics, but after a while I had to keep upping it and upping it and upping it. And so eventually that became not worth it, as well as the side effects. Those side effects that we receive or that we get from these medications that we try, which trying medications and going through this domino effect is already such an exhausting process, but the possible reduction in tics is not always worth taking that medication. And the last thing I wanted to point out was the last clip that really got to me and made me kind of my eyes well up a little bit, was what if I could be just not fine? Like, what if I could be more than just fine? And that's where that got to me a little bit. Now, I say a lot that I don't need to be fixed. I don't think, when people comment and say that I wish they could fix this for you, I wish they could cure you, and I always say, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. And I agree with that. I still believe that 100%. I don't need to be fixed. However, I think sometimes people get the wrong impression that because I feel that way for myself, that I don't support maybe somebody like this character on the show, Ezra, who wanted deep brain stimulation surgery. And the doctor kind of couldn't understand that as well. And because he was just fine, but obviously the character wanted to be more than just fine. His tics were affecting his everyday life. And I support that. That is a huge decision for somebody to make. I would not have it, but that is because my tics aren't so severe all of the time. Don't get me wrong, I have seasons of incredibly severe tics. Last year was one of those seasons for me. It was probably the most debilitating they've ever been for me. But so for me, it's not my choice for my life with Tourette syndrome, but I support people that really do the research, really go through all of the pros and cons and really see the benefit for them in their lives. I don't want it to ever seem that I don't support people trying to get treatment or anything like that, because I do 100,000%. And I think this was a great example of somebody just not wanting to feel, that itch inside of them all of the time. Overall, I think this was a pretty good representation. Like, so far at this point, I was pretty happy with the show and how they represented Tourette syndrome in the character. Now, I don't know if this actor has Tourette syndrome. I didn't look into it, but I think he did a good job. I have very similar tics to what this character's had, and although it was triggering because seeing people tic, or even just certain movements, facial movements, body movements, can trigger tics that I have that are similar or just create new ones. It was worth it to me because it was kind of nice to see where the person actually didn't have, he wasn't there for a joke. He was there for a very serious talk about Tourette syndrome and a serious depiction of Tourette syndrome. And I really appreciated that. Overall, like I said, I was pretty happy with this. However, this next clip that I'm going to show you, this is where I started to have a little bit of issue, and I wish it wouldn't have been said. So I'll just show it to you.
I'm not. It's easy to think of Tourette's as devastating because it's so visible, but there are surgeons and musicians with Tourette's who say their condition gives them the concentration, the creativity, the resilience to succeed. Often it's the invisible disorders like Allison's that are far more debilitating and less easily understood.
Mixed emotions here. Unfortunately for me, kind of sort of mostly negative, but I'll get into that. One of the things that I did really enjoy was the fact that he pointed out, the doctor in the scene pointed out, now, actually, let me back up. The doctor in this episode, he was very against the deep brain stimulation surgery for his patient for most of the episode. He does eventually come around, but I'll get into that. But I did enjoy the fact that he talked about all the successful people and how Tourette syndrome can help certain people with, like, musicians and everything else that they are doing. And for me, I do think Tourette syndrome has helped me. It's helped me be more determined. It's helped me be more empathetic. It's helped me in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot of positive things that Tourette syndrome has given me, and that people with Tourette syndrome, they can be incredibly successful. And I love, love, love that message that this show's presented. However, on the complete opposite end of that coin, what I didn't appreciate was that the comment saying that often other things are far more debilitating than Tourette syndrome, and because it's the things that are not seen, the invisible disabilities. Two things with that. One, Tourette syndrome can be a visible and an invisible disability. People only see the outward tics. They only see certain things. Like, even I get comments sometimes from people like, well, it doesn't seem that bad, because they just see these videos. They don't see the times where it is debilitating for me. They don't see the times where I'm crying on my husband, like laying on my husband crying because I'm in so much pain and I just can't stop moving, or sitting on my mom's lap still to this day at 35 years old because my tics just will not stop. Tourette syndrome can be debilitating for some cases. Some people have it so severe that it is debilitating. And some people have seasons in their life where it gets to be debilitating. For me, last year, at this point in my life, as some of my followers that have been following me closely know, it was a debilitating point for me. I couldn't drive 2 minutes up the road without fearing something would happen because my tics were so bad. I had so much pain in my back because every time I sat in a chair, I slammed my back against the chair. I was ticking more than I ever have in my entire life, and it was debilitating for me. So I didn't like the comment where I didn't like the comparison comment. I don't like to compare what I go through to somebody else. I don't even like to compare my Tourette syndrome to somebody else's, in a sense, and saying, well, mine's worse than yours, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that helps anybody, and I don't think it's fair to say that somebody's is more debilitating than the other because we don't know everybody's story, and we don't know how it affects their day-to-day life. And yeah, even in my videos, it might not seem that bad, and I try to have this positive attitude about it all the time, and I'm gonna keep doing that. But what we have to remember is that it is still hard. It's incredibly hard. And if somebody wants to not have to deal with that hard every single day of their life because of the outside world judgments. There was another scene, I'm not going to show it to you, but there was another scene where the patient was on a walk with a doctor and they were going to get food at a food truck, and the guy accidentally, he ticked and he hit somebody's sandwich out of their hand. And the guy got mad at first, and then all of a sudden when you saw him ticking and stuff, he apologized and all of those things. So the outside world, and there was another point where he said like, that Tourette syndrome is not the problem, the world is the problem. And that was another comment that I really loved, because that is the problem. We with Tourette syndrome, we are not the issue. It's not the acceptance that we don't receive that's the issue. And what it showed too is that when on that part where he hit the guy's sandwich out of his hand or whatever it was, and he flipped out but then apologized after he saw that, that's also not always what happens. People might see us ticking after that, or somebody ticking after that, after they bumped into them, hit something out of their hands, swore, whatever it might have been. And then even after we explain that we have Tourette syndrome, we can't help it, they're not always quick to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, let me make it up to you, blah, 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 blah. That's not the reality. The reality of the world that we live in is that people just get mad and they're staying in that mad place. And instead, they think that we shouldn't be out in public. Now, I'm not saying everybody's terrible and that we don't have good people that would apologize and make right of it, because that does happen too. But I just wanted to point out that that's not always the case for people, where people are all of a sudden so understanding. But it's also not the case for people where it's not debilitating sometimes. And tics aren't always visible. I tick with my stomach. I tick with parts of my body that people don't see. And just because you don't see it doesn't necessarily mean it's happening. And there's internal tics that I have. And kind of like when a song gets stuck in your head, I have these words and phrases and stuff sometimes that go over and over and over again. And that's what eventually turns into some of the vocal tics where I whisper words and phrases. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens sometimes. And if you don't think being able to control your body on top of the words coming out of your mouth is not debilitating in any sense, then you're mistaken. So that is the one part that I did not enjoy. But like I said, overall, I think this episode was a pretty good representation. Overall, I was pretty happy with it. That one line, right when he said it, I was just like, really wish you didn't just say that. But overall, I think it was a pretty good episode. But just keep an open mind. Again, that was Brilliant Minds season 1, episode 11. So it was promising. It's a good step in the right direction that we have somebody that had the physical tics and all those things. And I do want to say that the doctor did eventually come around and everything, but watch the episode for yourself. If you've seen the episode, let me know your thoughts, what you thought. And yeah, so let me know if you liked this kind of video too, because I've never done it. So maybe if there's other episodes of things that you'd like my take on, maybe I will do a couple more. So yeah, let me know what you thought of it.